Hi, I'm indie fantasy author Melinda Kucsera, and in this episode of Fantasy, Lore, and More, Claudia Klein is joining me to talk about her book, The Heir. So welcome, Claudia, and tell us about The Heir.
Hi, thanks for having me. So, I wrote my debut novel, The Heir. It published in 2019, and it is a story about two sisters in an epic fantasy world. So, like high fantasy separated from the real world. And in it, they are princesses, and their country is overtaken by marauders, and they are separated during the war. One sister, Kat, decides that her father comes in and says, you have to take your sister and flee to an island country where you two will be safe, because of course the women cannot fight in the battle. This is a men's thing to do. So she, like any kind of tomboy who's like already trained in archery, she defies her father and dresses up as a boy and goes and joins the battle anyways as an archer. And the battle goes south. They're taken over by marauders. And in the long run, Kat is imprisoned, and the heir to the throne of the country who waged war on her country rescues her. So it's like a prince rescues princess. It becomes an enemy still, a very sweet romance. In the meanwhile, Kat's little sister Lucy gets the order from a servant saying, hey, you're going to flee by yourself to the island nation. So she obeys her orders and flees to the island nation, where she is welcomed by the Prince Marcus and his family. And then she quickly realizes on the island that it's not as safe as she thinks it is, because it's about to break out into civil war. So she has adventures there, and I'm not going to go into like what happens at the end, but that's basically the premise of the book.
Oh, wow. There's a lot going on there.
Yep.
Do you want to go to the excerpt, or do you want to talk about it a bit more?
Let's go to the excerpt. I
Sure.
wanted to read you guys the first chapter of The Heir to kind of delve straight into it. So here we go. Here's chapter 1. The Arbonadian scout peered out over the landscape from his watchtower, keeping a close eye out for anything suspicious on the Erlingue border. All around this lone watchtower were vast fields, the wilderness between the two countries. About 400 yards straight ahead, the fields ran into a thick wood. A natural border like this helped to keep out invaders, but who knew what Erlingue would try next? They were neighbors, yes, but friends, not at all. The scout had heard enough from the messages sent to this outpost to know to be on the lookout for soldiers from Erlingue. If the rumors were right, there would be war this year. One could feel the tension in the air here on the border. Fear was not a word the scout wanted to admit he felt, but he knew how important his job was, and how perilous. If Erlingue did attack here, his whole country would suffer the consequences. His eyes nervously darted here and there from his elevated position on top of the tower, as he watched the field and the woods for any sign of human movement. Were the trees just moving from the wind, or was that the movement of shadows in the wood? He couldn't tell from this distance. His heart raced as he stared intently at those trees in the woods. Reaching instinctively for his bow, he held it in his hands before he was even aware that he had picked it up. His fingers twitched in anticipation, fitting an arrow from the pack on his back to the bowstring. The scout's instructions were to shoot a small party if they looked aggressive, but if it was a true invasion, he was to ride as quickly and quietly as possible to the capital to notify the king himself about the invasion. The scout thought of his horse, already saddled in the stable down below, ready to ride for aid if an army emerged from those woods. Then he saw them. First one horse and rider emerged from the woods, then another, and another. His throat went dry as he recognized them as war horses and their riders as knights. Before he even had time to see the end of the army emerging from the woods, he was flying down the ladder and onto his horse. He'd seen enough of the army emerging from the woods to know what war horses from Erlingue meant. This was the beginning of their invasion into Arbonad. War was imminent. He had to warn his country. The scout raced across the fields on his horse, hoping, praying that the enemy wouldn't see him and shoot him down. Nervously glancing behind him, he saw a large Erlinguian army following him, at least 200 horse and horsemen. 2 knights, outfitted in lighter armor than the army behind them, rode in the lead, pursuing him. He could see their bows fitted with arrows, trying to get him in their sights. He urged his horse on faster, but the beast was already galloping full speed. Darting a look behind him again, he realized the 2 knights were gaining on him. There was nothing he could do. The capital was 50 miles away. He wouldn't make it there on time. There had to be some other place he could ride to. He frantically searched his mind for an alternate plan to stay alive and warn Arbinad. Suddenly, veering to the left, he began his new course, heading to the nearest guard tower next to his post. It would be 5 miles away at least. If only he could make it. He looked behind him again. His sudden change of course had put only a few hundred yards between him and those knights. The 2 knights pursuing him kept following, while the rest of the Erlinguian army maintained their course straight towards the capital of Arbinad. What was he to do? The bowman came closer and closer to the scout as his poor horse began to fatigue. It was no match for the swifter horses of Erlingue. The left bowman's mouth twisted into a satisfied smirk. They had him now. He nodded to his partner, and with stunning accuracy, the pair simultaneously let their arrows loose. Both arrows hit their target, and the Erlinguians watched satisfactorily as the Arbinadian scout fell from his horse and landed dead in the field. "Let's go meet the rest of the camp," the Erlinguian warrior growled to his partner, and with that they took off in the direction of the rest of their army. The night was pitch black. A thick canopy of clouds covered the light from the full moon and any star trying to break through the darkness. The castle on the hill was cold, and the moisture in the air was so thick it was condensing and forming water droplets that slowly rolled down the stone walls inside. Prince Eric of Erlingue lay in bed, fully dressed, eyes wide open, unable to sleep in the few hours before his meeting. Tonight was the beginning of the rest of his life. Tonight would determine either his ultimate success or his ultimate doom. He had 1 more hour until the meeting. If he wanted, he could still back out. Should he really go through with this? The hours stole away as Eric debated with himself. His heart warned him that he was entering into a dangerous pact with a creature he hardly knew, but his head told him that if he wanted the glory he knew he deserved, he had to go through with it. And so he found himself rising from his bed and making his way through the dark, cold castle, up the winding stairs to the tallest tower on the castle wall. He opened the heavy wooden door to the small tower room. Thankfully, it was empty. Luck was on his side, and no guard had been posted there tonight. The room was sparsely furnished. A lone chair was set by the large window, upholstered with a red satin cushion. The arms and legs of the chair were ornately carved with a dragon's head design. Its mouth opened wide, as if the chair would gobble up anyone who sat upon it. The window shutters were open. There was no glass covering it. A cold, eerie wind blew into the room. Hung on one wall was a mirror, gold-rimmed, so small that you could only see your head and shoulders in it. Nothing else. Beside the mirror was a tall candle stand made of iron, twisting around and around all the way to the top, where a tall wax candle was cradled in it. The wick was untouched. It had never been lit. It must be almost time. Eric paced the room nervously. 3 steps forward, turn. 3 steps back, turn. Was this really the right thing to do? He thought back to the betrothal his brother Thomas had with the Arbinadian princess. The alliance between the 2 countries could be a good thing in the end. No, it couldn't. Not if Eric was going to become the emperor of the entire world. He must make the pact with this creature of darkness in order to defeat the 4 other countries in the world and rule them all single-handedly. A bell tower struck midnight somewhere in the city below, its low tones sending chills up Eric's spine. It was time. Suddenly, the candle was lit on its own, and the mirror began to glow. It was too late to turn back now. Eric turned and faced the mirror, expecting for half a second to see his own reflection. Instead, he watched as a dark, hunched figure appeared in the mirror. It wore a hood over its face, concealing most of its features. The only thing illuminating the creature was the light of the pale, cold moon shining down on its hood. This wasn't so bad. And then the creature spoke, and Eric's blood ran cold at the sound of its voice. But there was no turning back. He had a pact to make, and he would see it through. It was the only way. 18-year-old Kat looked up from her book as her father, King Alfred of Arbinad, stormed into the library, obviously in great distress. His eyes searched desperately among the many shelves filled with books from floor to ceiling on all four walls. "Where is it? Where is it?" he muttered frantically. She noticed he was half dressed in his military uniform, the buttons on his shirt buttoned up the wrong way. One arm thrust through his coat, the rest of it draping down his back. "Can I help you, Father?" she asked, rising from the leather chair she'd been seated on and going to his side. "What's wrong?" He jumped, startled at the sound of her voice, and turned to her, his eyes filled with anxiety and fear. "War!" he exclaimed. The word brought a chill to Kat's heart. "I have to go lead our armies. Oh, Catherine, it's our worst nightmare come true," he hastily tried to explain to her. "We've known for years that Erlingue has been building up their armies. We didn't know all their plans, of course, but yesterday they invaded our southern borders. All our scout towers burned. Our scouts haven't been heard from. Probably means they're all killed. We got wind of the invasion through a lone survivor of the village Hearst, just 30 miles from our capital. Seems these barbarians are burning all the villages as they move on to the capital. I've ordered all able-bodied men who own a weapon to meet me in the capital by tomorrow to form an army. But by the sound of how large the Erlinguian army is, we don't stand much chance. They're at least 1,000 strong, and I only have about 400 men I am able to place on the battlefield." "But how can they do that? I thought we had a diplomatic arrangement," Kat said, thinking of her betrothal made 5 years ago to Thomas, the Erlinguian prince. I don't know what's become of that, my dear. Perhaps King Richard of Erlingue has simply changed his mind." He lay his hand on her shoulder and tried to give her a reassuring smile. "Your brother Aidan and I will be riding to the capital tonight with the royal guard. We will do everything we can to defend our nation, I promise." The desire to help her father in the imminent battle burned in Kat's heart. She was a trained archer, and she knew she could pull her own weight in the battle. She had never been in battle before like Aidan had. If only her father would give her the chance, it couldn't hurt to ask. "Father, let me ride with you," Kat begged. "I know how to fight. I can help you." "No," he exclaimed. "You are to take your younger sister Lucy and ride to the south. Get as far away from here as you can. Ride to our fortress by the sea. It is hidden. If our country is overtaken, at least the royal line will not die out. You and Lucy will be safe there. If our country is taken over, you can take the ship docked in the harbor there to the island country of Everseen. There are allies and will welcome you." "But I want to fight." "No, as my eldest child, you are the heir to the throne. I will do everything to protect you. You will do as I say." With that, he turned and walked out of the room, slamming the door shut behind him. Kat let the book in her hands fall to the floor, sighing in defeat as she sank back onto the chair from which she had risen. There had to be a way that she could join the battle. She was deadly with a bow, and her father knew it. Why wasn't he letting her come? She angrily stomped through the castle halls to her chambers. It wasn't fair. If she didn't take matters into her own hands, she would never get to prove her strength in battle. How would she be able to lead her country militarily without experience? That was it. She'd had it with avoiding danger. She was going to fight in the battle, and there was nothing her father could do to stop her. She summoned a manservant and made the arrangements to get Princess Lucy safely to the castle by the sea. Lucy would be accompanied by 10 servants and 6 soldiers. They would protect her sister and keep her safe. She didn't mention that her father had wanted her to come along too, and thankfully none of the servants asked. The arrangements made, she slipped into her brother Aidan's room and stole some clothes. They were a little big on her, but they would do to disguise her as a boy. Back in her own room, she took her long brown hair down from the bun she always wore it in and looked at herself in the mirror. Her mother had adored her beautiful thick locks. She had promised her mother before she died 3 years ago that she would never cut her hair. She hated to break her promise now, but it couldn't be helped. It would have to go. "I'm sorry, Mother," she said as she took a pair of scissors to her hair. The locks were soon on the floor. My throat is getting dry. The locks were soon on the floor, and Kat was brushing the wild mess that remained on her head, hoping that it was good enough to pass as a boy. Scooping up the hair on the floor, she flung it out the bedroom window, where it was caught up in the wind and quickly blew away. Running her fingers through her short hair, Kat second-guessed herself. Was this really the best thing to do, disguise herself as a boy in order to join the battle? Just as quickly, she reminded herself that her 16-year-old brother was getting to join the battle, and no one was questioning that. And besides, the Arbonadian army needed her. She was a skilled archer, and she knew for a fact that her father only had about 50 archers in his entire army. Her father needed her in the battle, even if he pretended that he did not. If she proved herself in this battle, perhaps her father would see her as more than just the heir to the throne who needed protecting. Perhaps he would see that she was fully capable of protecting herself as well as her country. She left the room with steel determination. She would see this thing through. 15-year-old Princess Lucy sighed as she leaned over the railing of her bedroom's balcony. Everyone was so busy on this hot spring day, hurrying and scurrying here and there. The servants were talking in hushed voices, which wasn't normal, and she couldn't remember the last time she'd seen an actual family member. Where was everyone? Here she was, feeling like a princess locked in a tower, with nothing to do but rot as she waited for her Prince Charming to come rescue her. But that was not the case. She was merely bored, watching the events of the castle inhabitants from her balcony on this hot spring day. She had seen more soldiers than usual. Soldiers always made her nervous. Her older sister Kat had for years told her the story of how once, during a jousting tournament, little baby Lucy had escaped from her nursemaid and gone toddling past the fence that separated the jousters from the royal viewing pavilion. She had made it all the way to the center of the field before her nurse had spotted her and dashed to retrieve her. The knights on their horses had been inches away from trampling her when her nurse had dashed in between the oncoming chargers, snatched up the toddler, and rolled away to safety, just seconds before the knights' lances collided. No doubt, even though she didn't actually remember the event, some place in her subconscious had remembered it and left an eternal fear of soldiers in her. "My lady?" She turned to see her personal maid, Millie, standing in the balcony doorway, nervously wiping her hands on her frilly white apron. Lucy saw the fear in her eyes. "What is it, Millie?" Lucy asked, suddenly worried for her family's safety entering her heart. "Arbonad is under attack by Erlingue, my lady," Millie explained. "I've been sent to help you pack your things. Your father has arranged for you to flee to safety." "Flee? Just me? No one else?" Lucy asked, confused that her father would send her alone. There were other people that needed to stay safe as well, who could flee with her, like Kat, Aidan, and father. "Not that I know of, my lady," Millie answered innocently. "Come, we must hurry. Your father wants us to leave as soon as possible." "Are you coming with me?" "Yes, my lady," Millie said with a small smile. Lucy felt her throat tighten as she hurried into the bedroom to help Millie pack. She felt scared. She wasn't brave and adventurous like Kat. Wherever she was, Kat was probably eagerly anticipating the coming battle, ready to do her part in the fighting. Millie already had a bag on the bed and had it placed a few things in it. The two girls quickly filled it with everything else the princess would need for several months. Millie reminded Lucy several times that they had to pack lightly each time she put unnecessary things in the bag, like her dancing slippers and her favorite books. Everything they brought had to be taken on horseback. She quickly found herself realizing she would have to learn to live without where they were going. The next hour or two was a blur of packing and rushing through the castle, talking to a few highly trusted servants in whispers. The fact that the princess was leaving was to be kept a secret. No one was to know that she had left, and no one was to know who had gone with her. If Arbonad was taken over, they didn't want the Erlinguians to know that a member of the royal family had escaped. Before she knew it, Lucy found herself atop the back of a horse, heading away south with 6 soldiers for an escort, as well as 10 servants, Millie being one of them. The sun had set, and it was very dark in the fields as they rode farther and farther away from civilization. Their horses were laden down with provisions for their journey. She wore a dark dress covered with a black woolen cloak, the hood up. But it didn't cut out the bite of the cold night wind. Darkness masked their escape. It was a cloudy night. The moon broke through the clouds every now and then, lighting up the path they took one minute, the next minute plunging them back into darkness. Lucy's heart was in her throat. She knew that her father and brother would soon head out with the Arbonadian army to try and stop the Erlinguians from taking control of their country. She wouldn't know the outcome for a long time. Would she ever feel safe in her beloved country again? And where in the world was Kat? Her sister was heir to the Arbonadian throne. If anyone needed to be fleeing with her, it was Kat. But she hadn't seen her sister in 2 days. Where was she? Lucy thought it odd that she had been the only member of the royal family chosen to escape to safety like this. Why had her father, brother, and sister decided to stay behind? Shouldn't Kat at least have come with her? She was the heir to the throne, after all. It was important that the heir escape and live. Or perhaps that was the reason she had stayed behind. As the heir to the throne, she needed to learn from their father what to do in a situation like this, when their land was under enemy invasion. Lucy knew it was futile to worry about Kat. Kat knew how to take care of herself. As the future ruler of Armanet, she had been trained not only diplomatically, how to rule a country, but also militarily, how to wield a sword and ride a war horse. Her father must be thinking this would only serve to further Kat's training. All Lucy knew was that she was afraid for her own safety, afraid for the safety of her family. The thought of never seeing them again sent tingles down her spine. Would that be her fate? She was going to the palace by the sea, but if Arbanad was conquered, what would keep the Erlinguians from finding her there and killing her later on? Would she ever see her family again, safe and alive? So many questions crowded into her mind, overwhelming her, and she had no answers for any of them. Only time would give her the answers she so desperately wanted. For now she rode on furiously through the night, her horse instinctively following the soldier's horse in front of her. Stefan was the leader of this group, her guide. Even though she knew she could trust this man, her heart still pounded in her chest so loudly she could hear the sound of it in her ears. She was afraid for her very life. Thud, thud, thud went the sound of her horse's hoofs on the dry ground, echoing the beating of Lucy's fearful heart. What would morning bring? And that is the end of the first chapter of the book.
Oh, a lot happened in there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not. I was getting the impression that it's kind of the world that they live in. It's like maybe like analogous. I think that's the word. To like medieval, like a medieval sort of fantasy style world, like medieval European type sort of world. Is that true? Yeah.
Do you want me to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah.
When I wrote this book, I had kind of only really read like Lord of the Rings and Narnia, which are very like European based fantasy worlds. So I definitely started coming up with the countries of the world, and then I decided I'm going to actually model them off of like medieval Europe. And what happens in this world is Erlingue invents the gun. So I was like, I'm going to put it in like 1400s when Spain invents the arbalest type world. So Erlingue is based off of the country of Germany. Arbanad is based off the country of England. Angloth, which is based off of, I'm going to say Spain. Halifax is based off of France. And then we have an island country, which is based off of kind of like South America during colonial times, like when the Spanish kind of invade South America.
Oh, it's very cool. So, all right. So you've read Lord of the Rings and Narnia. So, is there magic in your world?
There is magic, and it's the first book. It's very light magic. It's almost no
Right.
magic because the magical creature in it is the creature that you met in that second scene with Eric, and he's making the pact with the creature. And the second book kind of right now I have a complete trilogy in the series, and I think I'm ending it with that. I'm just going to keep it a trilogy. So the second book has a lot more magic. In book 2, we see the creature creating other monsters, and then they go and attack the world, and then they kind of realize like, oh, we need magic to fight these magical creatures. So then they find other people who have magic. And then the third book, I was finally starting to get reviewers saying like, I want more magic in this series. So the third book is called The Wizard, and it is my version of, hey, here's more magic. But the whole world is still kind of a light magic world.
I see. And like, do we find out more about the monster that's making other monsters?
He remains very mysterious throughout the entire book of the Heir. You find out a lot more about him in The Crown.
I see. So and The Crown is book 2.
The Crown is book 2.
And is the whole trilogy out now?
Yes, the whole trilogy is out. The Wizard, which is book 3, came out in August of last year.
Oh, okay. Very cool. So then what are you writing now? Are you said you're not planning on revisiting this world.
So in The Wizard, I made a reference of like maybe coming back and doing like a Christmas novella. Because at the end, all the characters are like, we're having to go to our own kingdoms now, but we know each other and we're good friends. So let's get together for Christmas. So that might happen in the future. But right now I'm working on something for my backlist. It's a story based off of Tolkien-esque elves. So like that, like Tolkien kind of reinvented the elf for us. So I made an entire world of elves. And this is a very Lord of the Rings type storyline, I would say, because there's an evil overlord who is conquering the land slowly, like province by province. And then we have our main character, Gwyneth. And in book 1, this book is coming out on Kickstarter in September, by the way. In book 1, Gwyneth starts getting these dreams. And they're really scary dreams, and they all have to do with like her fighting the monster or being like the prisoner of the monster who's taking over their world. And she goes on into book 2 to like discover the prophecy that will kind of like tell them like who's going to defeat the monster. And then like the rest of the series is kind of like the story of them defeating the monster.
That's very cool. Okay, so that's cool though that you're doing that. You have this low, like I guess this is like low fantasy series with the Heir, and now you're doing the total opposite, which is very high fantasy world full of elves. So there's just elves. There's nobody else in this world.
Yes, I did.
That works with Tolkien. Like I don't know if you've read the Silmarillion, but like he created the elves, and he created men, and that was kind of it. He wasn't going to create anybody else. And then the Valar wanted to create their own races, and that's how we got the Ents and the dwarves. And then Sauron and Morgoth obviously wanted their own people, so Sauron created dragons and shapeshifters and other things, and the orcs. Just interesting. So I'm sorry, go on.
Yeah, so the Heir is in my published trilogy, and it is a story of like all humans. I would compare it, like I was comparing it to John Flanagan's Ranger's Apprentice series, because that's the one fantasy series I have read that is like a world of all humans and they fight the occasional monster. So that's kind of what you can expect from this. And then for the new series I'm working on, it's called the Carafine Chronicles. I didn't quite want to copy like a Tolkien-esque, like I'm going to have elves and dwarves and humans. I didn't want to do that. And I hadn't thought of the idea of like, oh, I can create my own race other than like calling orcs something else. So yeah, I just decided to run with all elves. So right now it's all elves. I am debating like because their border is their world is kind of bordered by mountains on all 4 sides. So I'm kind of wondering like they don't really know what's beyond the mountains, so maybe like beyond the mountains is other creatures, but I haven't quite decided.
No, that could be very cool, especially if that could be very cool, like to have other races out there and they just don't know about it because they don't have a reason to leave. They don't know. They maybe assume that there's other stuff out there, but like you're not going to cross a mountain range, especially if it's a very steep one like the Himalayas or something, unless you're certain there's something really amazing on the other side that includes like food and water and things that you're probably running out of at that point. So, no, that's very cool. So, and this new series, is that going to be just a trilogy or is that more open-ended?
It was originally a trilogy, and then book 1 was getting too long for my comfort, so I split it into 2 books. So now I'm thinking it's going to be like a 4 to 6 book series, just depending on how I rewrite the books. Because right now, all the books are drafted, but they need major revision, so they might expand.
That's cool. So you write everything and then you start publishing it.
Not exactly. I've been writing since I was 7, and I started writing fantasy when I was about a sophomore in high school, I think. So I have a lot of books for my backlist, and it took me a while. Like I graduated high school and I spent like 6 years trying to figure out like how to get published. I was looking at traditional publishers and querying, and I was finding next to nothing. We're talking like
Yeah,
back in
it's rough.
2010 when it was
Yeah.
the indie author was still very new, and people hadn't quite figured it out yet.
Yeah, I didn't even know about it in 2010.
Yeah, neither did I.
I didn't discover it till like 2016, and like at that point I've been writing for like since I was like 13 or maybe younger. I don't know.
Yeah, I discovered Indie World in 2016 too, and then like 6 months later, I got pregnant with my first child. So like becoming a young mom and trying to publish books at the same time doesn't quite match. So it took me 4 years to. I published The Heir in 2019. It took me 4 years to complete the series, and I'm just still a young mom with kids at home all day long with me. So I'm just taking a step back and being like, I'm only going to publish like one book a year. I'm not going to try and go super fast because it's not really possible right now. But
no, you're doing an important job raising little humans.
Thanks.
I spend time with my nephew and now my new niece, and I applaud all you parents out there. It is not easy raising young humans and keeping them from harm.
Yeah.
Especially when they're too little to know that, no, we do not stick our fingers in the socket. And other fun things. And that's an important job too. But so that makes, that makes total sense though, that you would want to write as much as you can before starting to publish it to make sure that the story works, that you don't have to change them. Especially when you're starting a new series. Like, that's always like concerning because you're like, where is this going to go? Is it going to go where I wanted it to go?
Yeah. Right now I'm waiting to draft book 3, and I'm just thinking about it more and more. I'm like, does this really work? Because what happens is the first 2 books follow Gwyneth and her love interest. And then the second 2 books are supposed to follow a different character and her love interest. And then the books 5 and 6 are supposed to follow a third character and her love interest. So it's kind of like 3 romanticities, but it's definitely very epic fantasy. So I'm just debating, like, will readers like that, or will they quit reading after book 3? And it's hard to tell,
I mean, like I don't read romance, but I see a lot of people in like the different readers groups and things and talking about romanticities, and some people like the different couples following them in a series. Some people like following the same one across like multiple books. So like, I guess it all depends on at the end of book 2 if you've hooked them into the next couple's story. No pressure.
Yeah.
So like, I guess they have to see enough of them in book 2 to want to see their story continue. And I think it helps if like the first couple like reappears, find some plot reason to reappear or something, because then that thread connects them. So but it definitely, in romance, like that's seems to be like a really popular thing to have each book or several books and with one couple, and then they get their happily ever after and then move to the next one. I hear about these things. I'm not a romantasy fan, so I can't say that like I have firsthand like knowledge of it and have read it, because I shy away from books that are like about romance. I like the action, the adventure, the magic, the world, the characters going and doing crazy stuff. The crazier the better. Even if it's a low fantasy world. Like, I want to see them do, let's go to the limits of what this world has, and let's see what we can do and how can we break it.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what The Heir is. Like, I get my reviewers are like, the romance was kind of thrown in at the end. So this is definitely very like action adventure-y, fast-paced. Probably the type that you would like rather than a romantasy. But yeah, my new series is delving into romantasy because I know how popular they are right now.
Yeah.
And there's also like, I was writing this in like 2010. So it's like I have to get it published. Like this world has been in development for way too long for me like to sit on it any further.
And like, and it's like, in this, like, but is a romance really thrown at the end, or did the characters just throw you a curveball and be like, "Oh yeah, there's a romance now, deal with it"?
Because like originally it was like Thomas and Kat were kind of the main POV, and then I added Lucy and her going to the island later on in the development of the book. So like Thomas and Kat becoming like an enemies to lovers romance was really early before I added Lucy's POV, but then like to match out the timeline, oh, it was so hard to match out the timeline for the Heir. I rearranged chapters for like a year.
Yikes.
But I added Lucy's POV, and then the whole enemies to lovers romance kind of did fall to like the second half of the book, which is maybe why reviewers are saying that like it was just kind of thrown in at the end. I don't know.
Also, you just say, "Look, the characters. I can't make them do anything." Well,
Yeah,
I
it's
can't.
like all the muse talking.
Yeah, like I don't read fantasy. I mean, I don't read romance. I do read fantasy. I don't read romance, but like every once in a while, like two characters in my book would be like, "Yeah, we want to have romance." I'd be like, "Yeah, but I don't write romance. You can't. You can do it on the sidelines."
That's funny.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's really cool. So like that's really cool that you've read like it's the only so it's still so the only fantasy books you've read still are the Ranger series, the Narnia and the Lord of the Rings, or have you read more
No,
since the Heir?
it was about 2.5 years ago now. I realized I've only really read Lord of the Rings over and over and over again in Narnia, same
Love it.
way. So I was like, I gotta read some modern fantasy. So I've read a lot of modern YA epic fantasy
Hmm.
series, and right now I'm working through Wheel of Time, and I'm
Oh
on book
God.
9.
My condolences.
I really
I
loved it
I got to
until
8 and then I
yeah,
threw it
I'm
against
on
the
book
wall
9
and
and
that's it.
I'm on book 9 and just kind of like, do I actually want to read it? The audiobooks are really good. I'm mainly listening to the audiobooks of those ones.
I read the physical paperbacks on the
Ooh,
train because I worked in the city and like I just threw it at a wall
yeah.
at one point. I was like, I can't anymore. This is
Yeah,
like I don't
basic.
care anymore and I hate all the characters. Like
Yeah.
it I liked everything up to the end of book 4 and then I was just not feeling it from book 5 to 8 and just progressively started to dislike more and more of the characters until by the end, by 3/4 of the way through the 8th book, because I didn't finish the 8th book, any liking I had for anything in this world, in that world, or any of the characters was completely gone. And I was like, why am I reading this when I don't care anymore what happens to them? At a certain point, I was like, dude, they just deserve it, you know?
Yeah. I'm
So,
slogging my way through those middle books because I've heard like the 11th book till like the ones that Brandon Sanderson wrote, they're really good. So I'm like, I gotta get to the end and read the
I
Brandon Sanderson.
heard that everything from 4 until Brandon Sanderson is bad.
Yeah.
And definitely 5 isn't too bad. I just don't. There were some things I really didn't like, and they were very prominent, and I really didn't like that. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just, and the sad thing is, like, even when Brandon Sanderson picked up the series, like, I had no desire to go back and reread it or try to get through those books to his books.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm done. I can't.
Yeah.
Squeezed out any feeling I had for it and left me empty. But I hope that you can make it through, like, because I know people do. I see the comments in the big reader fantasy groups all the time. Somebody is like, "Does it get better?" And I'm always tempted to say, "No, it doesn't." But I have not read beyond the 8th book, and I didn't even finish the 8th book. So I like don't post because I don't comment because I can't say for certainty that it doesn't get better
Yeah.
because it may. I never got there, so I don't know. I have to say, like, The Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien is tough reading, but it was better than those middle
Really?
books.
See, I've read The Silmarillion. I've tried to read it twice, and going through that second time, I'm just like, I can't. Like,
I love,
it's so much more dry than Lord of the Rings, and I'm just like,
yeah.
in love with Lord of the Rings. I'm like, how? Like,
It's
why did
like
you try and publish this one first, Tolkien? Like,
he didn't. Yeah, no, he didn't. It was Christopher Tolkien edited it and put it out.
yeah.
Like Tolkien never meant for it to be published in that form. He hadn't finished it, and we don't know what his version would have been like. Um, I do like the Ainulindale, which is the beginning, the creating of the world. It was
Mhm.
tough to get through, but it was also really interesting. So I was like, I'm getting through this, and it helped that I was on TikTok a lot, and they were doing a buddy read with it, and some like really prominent like Tolkien folks were talking about all the different things. So that made it easier because someone was explaining what was going on in this. And so I didn't, so it was like, okay, I got some of it and then I got the rest from the LOR talk on TikTok.
Mhm.
And yeah, but I liked Beren and Luthien's story. The Fall of Gondolin was really good. I still really hate that guy. Mental block against him. He who shall not be named, who convinced them to build a bridge. You have a freaking hidden city. Don't build a bridge. People can find you. They can use the bridge to get into your city and sack it, which is what happens. But yeah, there's a lot of really good stuff in there. You have to take it section by section. Like
Mhm.
some of the stuff with like the Rohan was good too. There's a lot of really like interesting stuff in there too. You have to just take it section by section though. You can't
Yeah.
read it like a. It's not a book. It's more like an anthology
Mhm.
of stories, and if you read it that way, I don't remember who suggested that, and like it made a lot more sense because it is not one continuous narrative. It is
Yeah.
different stories about the first age in one book. So
Yeah, I remember reading it the first time. I thought it was like one book, and I was so confused. And then, like the second
yeah,
time, I
me
was like, "No,
too.
this is a bunch of short stories. I can do this."
Yeah,
So it made a
yeah.
whole
No,
lot.
I did the same thing the first time I read it, and then someone said it was like you said, a bunch of short stories, and that made a lot more sense. And I was like, let's read to the end of this section of things, and then things will be different. The next one,
Mhm.
yeah. But coming back to the Heir, which we actually came here to talk about. So, all right. So we've got the sisters who are separated, and we've got the princes who are separated by hatred, and we saw that in the beginning. There was this in the chapter you read. Well, not the sisters getting separated. We didn't see that in that chapter. We did
Not
see
quite.
the the brother, the princes having their issue, which like what did the like that's the thing I was wondering. I guess it probably comes up later. That might be a spoiler. Like, how did the princes come to hate each other? Were they
So
just born that way?
Eric, as far as I remember, I tell the backstory in the book, but as far as I remember, Thomas was King Richard, which is their father's favorite son. He's the second son, and then Eric was his mother's favorite son, and his mother died when they were like teenagers or somewhere around that age. So he just like his mom died, his favorite person, like his dad kind of ignored him because he was kind of like this shrimpy kid. He was just like, and you're the heir. Um, and he just became like really sinister and just kind of started turning evil and turned more and more evil. And he didn't get along with his brother and his dad, who were just kind of like these just noble characters. And it just kind of went from there, and it gets really bad in the air, because Eric kind of like makes that pact with the creature, and then that's kind of
Mm.
the point of no return. So it's like, well, if Thomas is going to be like really just and noble person, like the guy who makes the pact with the evil monsters, like and bring dark magic to the world, like he has to be eliminated. So it's tough.
Yeah. So like what why are Thomas and his father just? Like what makes him that way?
um That's really hard for me to pinpoint. I would just say like the way that they treat other people. They treat them with respect. They treat them with courtesy. Like Thomas goes out of his way to save Kat. Kat is in the middle of the book. Kat's like imprisoned in the dungeon by Eric. And she's just going to either be killed or spend the rest of her life as a slave because she's a prisoner of war.
Yeah.
And Thomas makes himself an outlaw in order to rescue her. So they just kind of start fleeing from Eric because Eric's going to be like, I'm going to obey the law and I'm going to like kill my brother. I've hated him anyways. So I'm going to kill my brother because he just made himself an outlaw by rescuing the crown princess who's a prisoner of war. So Thomas always like fights to do what is right and to do the right thing.
And I guess his father is the same way, and that's where he learned it from.
His brother's the same way. His father was kind of influenced by Eric to wage war on Arbonad, even though they did have that betrothal going on to like align the two countries politically. But I guess his father kind of in his old age, just decided to, okay, I'm going to trust the heir to the throne, who's Eric, the evil guy, and just wage war on the country.
Well, so, what was Eric's reasoning for the war? Because he had to tell his dad something, like to get control of the army. Like, you know, it's not like getting the keys to the family car. You know,
I'm not sure if I actually go into much detail about why, but basically he wants to become the emperor of the world. So he sells himself out to the creature, and the creature's just like, here's your first step in becoming the emperor to the world. Wage war on Arbonad. So then Eric's just like following orders from this creature of dark magic. And he has to convince his father, who's still the king. But then, well, this might be a spoiler, but I'm going to say it anyways. Eric is the one who actually kills King Richard. I don't think it's really explicit in the book, but you kind of get the idea. And that happens in chapter 2. So it's not too much of a spoiler.
Right, right.
So
that makes more sense how he's able to wage war, because if he's the crown prince and daddy passes away, he's now the king. He doesn't need to ask for the keys to the army. The army is now his. So he's only attacking her country because he wants to be the emperor of the world. Mm-hmm. Not because there's anything there that he wants or anything.
Nope, he just wants like, give me power type character, and he feels like becoming emperor is that give me power type thing.
So after her country is conquered, he's, I guess, got plans to take over other countries.
He has plans. He makes an alliance with Angloth, and then they go on the island country that Lucy just fled away to.
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
Yep.
No, it sounds like a fun story.
It's
with
super
all the
fun.
It sounds like Kat gets into quite a lot of trouble.
Yep. Doing the whole like Mulan thing. I'm going to dress up like a boy to fight in the war. So yeah.
So I guess her sister doesn't do that, and that's how they get separated. Like,
no, they're like polar opposites, these two characters. Like Kat is literally like, think of Katniss Everdeen from the Hunger Games.
Mm-hmm.
And that is Kat. I did not do like name Kat after Katniss on purpose. That just happened. And then Lucy is like just a really calm, gentle person, obeys everything, follows the rules. Yeah. So just polar opposites.
I see. So she goes because dad said to go. Sister goes, nah, I'm going to pull a Mulan and go into the army, and because that's going to work out. I'll bet when it doesn't work out, she's like, well, maybe I should have fled with Lucy.
Yeah.
Maybe dad was right. That is... No, it sounds like a fun book. Is there anything else you want to say about the Heir?
Please read it. It's super fun. Right now, you can get it on... you said this is going out tonight, right?
I'm going to try really hard to get it out tonight. It's already almost 9 o'clock here.
Right now, guys, if you see this before Tuesday the 19th, you can get this book and the sequels on Kickstarter it's like a book bundle that's cheaper than what you can get it for like buying all 3 books on Amazon. So it's on Kickstarter. Go buy it. I have book boxes in there. And it has.
Did you give me the link for that? Is that in the?
No, because honestly, when I think I set this up, I didn't have the link. But
oh, okay.
It to you.
Yeah, send me the link and I'll put it in the show notes. So just for everybody's information, we're recording this on March 15th, 2024. And so when she says the 19th, she means March 19th of 2024.
Sorry.
That's all right.
I hadn't all my ducks in a row. Yeah, so it's super fun, Kickstarter. And then otherwise you can just get it wherever you buy ebooks online. The whole series, it's not exclusive to Amazon anymore, and it's everywhere.
Yeah, I saw that. So what's on Kickstarter right now? That's the elf book? I thought you said that was coming in September.
These books are on Kickstarter right now. Yep.
Oh, those. So the series. What is the series name for the Heir belongs to?
The Erlingue series. Yeah.
So the Erlingue books, which includes the Heir, the Crown, and the Wizard, are on Kickstarter, and you're doing. And what is your Kickstarter for? Hardcovers or special editions?
The Kickstarter is to get new artwork made for the series. So I got. I got like 5 character cards that come in the book boxes, and then I have 3 different artwork scenes that I had done, as well as like this is basically like a buy really special book boxes type campaign, but it was to get more artwork done for the series because I was like, this would be so cool if I could get artwork done. So
okay. So the main feature of the Kickstarter is for book boxes that come with copies of the book, artwork, and maybe other goodies.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Very cool. All right, so she's gonna send me the link. So the link will be in the show notes or the description, depending on where you're watching or listening. So you have no excuse not to click and go check it out. Yeah, and thank you so much, Claudia, for coming and for talking about the Heir and other things as well. Nerding out on books with me.
Thanks for having me. This was so much fun, especially the nerding out about other books thing. So
yeah. No, and I wish you much luck with your read through of the Wheel of Time. Good luck on that. When you come back with another book or series, you'll have to let us know about your progress or lack of progress, or if you hit the wall on that read through, or if you persevered, and if you can confirm the rumor that it gets better and which book it actually gets better in. So yeah, so hopefully Claudia will be back in the future and we can get an update on that and on her elf book. I forgot the title. What was the title of that one?
Well, I actually didn't say the title. The title is Song of Siege and Shadows. And as far as I know, it's coming to Kickstarter September of this year. And very cool. I don't have the Amazon release scheduled yet, but we're getting there.
Okay, well, hopefully you'll come back and we can chat about it and find out about your Wheel of Time progress.
That can be super fun.
Yeah, no, that will be. So that'll do it for this episode of Fantasy Lore and More. Thank you for listening. Have a great day or a great night wherever you are. And don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and all the things so that you will be notified when Claudia comes back to give us all these updates and more. Thank you.